Hi, and welcome to Where Are They Now? I'm your host, Heather Lindstedt from the class of 1985, and today I have a special guest from the class of 1963, Mr. Bob Chevalier. Bob, thank you very much for joining me today.
I'm delighted to be here. It's so nice to see you and all the rest of the folks around. It's great.
It's interesting, though, certain people come on here, and I have quite a connection to my guests, but really you probably know more about the story of Chelmsford than I ever will, so, and how it impacted you.
Yeah.
So you start out in the Chelmsford school system, and what was that like back in the day? And you jumped a lot of schools, went to different places, and those kind of things. But what was the atmosphere for the students then?
Well, for me, at any rate, I came from North Chelmsford, lived in North Chelmsford, and I started in the Chelmsford school system at the Cressy School. And from there, and actually I started before that in kindergartens in North Chelmsford at the church in North Chelmsford. So from there I went to the North School, and then from the North School to the Highland School, and I think from Highland School on to the high school. And so there was a lot of switching around during that regard, but it was all something that I enjoyed, and I've got tremendous friends at each stage during that career that are still around today, and it's great to deal with that.
And I remember there was a small field outside of Cressy, and I always thought to myself, how could anybody go to school there? And what was that like? I mean, it was tiny. It was a little box,
You
really.
mean the field right behind the school?
Yeah, but the school, but when you looked at the school, it was a little box. Like,
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
In fact, every time I go by it now, I say, how did they ever fit that big box of a school up on that hill?
Yeah.
You know?
But then it allowed you to meet everybody.
Yes.
Like, I mean, so it was really, is that what you think, though, created the start of the Chelmsford High School culture?
Yeah.
Back when you guys were around, and that everybody just always seemed to build a camaraderie when they got to the high school and working together.
Yeah, well, that was certainly an easy thing to do. When we got to the high school, there were lots of new faces around, but boy, it didn't take very long for me to incorporate myself right into that group, and you know, by the time we finished a half of our freshman year, we were all part of the group.
Now, you also started out because you were playing sports and you were
Yes.
playing football.
Yeah.
That was quite the class, you know, the
Yeah.
1963 class.
Yeah.
Talk about that and being part of football.
Yeah. Well, being part of football was so great for me. My brother had played in the 1952, 53, 54 time period, and I wanted so much to be a part of that thing. And so I joined, and of course, as a freshman, I was a little guy, and I played, you know, mostly with freshman football in my freshman year, and then eventually made my way through the JVs and played with the varsity.
Yeah.
And it was a great something I've been very happy with all along.
Right, and more great friends.
Yeah.
But how about in the classroom? I mean, you had some interesting teachers, because we'll talk about someone that has kind of a legacy, and everybody talks about one of the more famous biology teachers.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, he was certainly one of the great teachers that I had, and he was biology. I didn't have him as a teacher, I think, until my senior year.
Yeah.
And there were other great teachers in there too. By the way, Mr. Simonian continues to be Mr. Simonian,
Right.
but I've been fortunate enough to work on the reunion committees for the last over 60 years now, and he's been at all those reunions, and he's been a great friend all that time. But there are other friends as well that came from those years. Certainly along in the sporting area, there was Coach McCarthy, who was, to me, a wonderful guy. I loved him. The same thing is true with Mr. Nolan, who was not only was he the coach, but he was someone that we all looked up to. If you were in his class, you didn't dare talk to anyone. I mean, we all had a great deal of admiration for him. An interesting thing for me was the time that I spent in English class, because when I was done, when it was all over, I thought, oh, what is this all about? But years later, I really wish that I'd paid a lot more attention in English class, and that was Miss Canine was the teacher in that. And there were some great lessons to be learned there, not only in reading and going back and rereading some of the things later on in life, but all of that is what helped to set me up for what I eventually did in life.
Well, and isn't that the truth, right? Did you really know what you wanted to do when you were in high school, or was it more of a feel that the teachers gave you that sense of passion that whatever you do decide, that you're going to have success?
Yeah. When I was in school, I was really looking forward to finishing high school. I didn't know what I wanted to do. My older sister was a college graduate at that time. She was a music teacher, by the way, and she still is around today. And my brother had joined the Marine Corps, so he was off doing his thing. And my other sister was in business school, and I figured I'd have to go to school somewhere. I did go to Northern Essex, and shortly after January of that year, while I was a freshman there, my father passed away. And that caused quite a few problems for us because we had a house and mortgages and all of that, and I went to work to see if I could help out somehow. And I later on graduated from Northern.
So were you the youngest in the family?
Yes.
Yeah. So going to Chelmsford, really, you knew almost what to expect, though.
I think so.
Like they guided you.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Both of them guided us through. Yeah.
So, but after high school, though, you felt like you wanted to go to college and followed the footsteps of your siblings, and
Right.
so there was that little bit of a setback. So, is that what launched your career, though, in finding?
Actually, that's what gave me a career. I had an aunt at that time who happened to work for Honeywell in Lowell, and she made arrangements for me to get a job there. And I got a job in manufacturing, and I worked at that for a year or so, and it was a great job, and I know that I did well there. And they very quickly offered me promotions, and I went into computer operations and eventually into the software business and developing software on the machines that Honeywell made. And at that time, Honeywell was a big player next to IBM.
Yeah.
And so I was, into that market. That was quite a meaningful time for me. If you stop and think of what goes on in the computer business these days, you can always Google stuff, but let's remember that Google didn't hit the market until 1984 or something like that, and Honeywell was in the business that I was working for them in 1964.
Now, what do you think gave you the confidence to be into something that's all inspiring, right? Because it was brand new.
Yeah, exactly.
And
right.
like when you were moving into that, were you like, is this ever going to go? Did you get that sense like this is going to take off, or did you have that sense at some point like, what is this all about?
Yeah, it's interesting. I could see so many things coming out of it from every step along the way. I recall one day that the company used to bring their sales teams, folks that they had in various sales classes, into the company to see how the individual processes were running. And one day they came by the area that I was working in, and we had to display things for them and so forth. But I looked up and I saw what was probably 15 or 20. Unfortunately, they were all men at that time. And I watched them and listened to them and answered their questions. And I thought right then, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to do. No question about it. Interestingly enough, I had talked to my boss about that. And a situation came along to to get me into the programming field there, and I did that with them for a number of years. And then another opportunity came up for me to go to work in the Federal Systems Division and work as a site analyst at a federal government site. And I did that for a couple of years, and then a sales job opened up, and I got the sales job in the federal business. It was one thing right after another. I mean, I can barely recount it all when it happened. That all took place until 1967 or so. I was in a job that I really wanted to be in with the company.
So do you think that part was education, family, or playing sports, and just that methodical approach of, I can keep doing this and I can keep taking step
Yeah, I
after
guess that's
step?
what it was. I kept seeing the way forward in that company at that time, and they were open to it and helped me along.
Yeah. So just learning how to network and talk,
Right.
and with obviously good communication skills and being a good listener, because otherwise you don't move up.
Yeah.
If you don't know where you're headed,
Yeah.
if you haven't heard what you want to go get, that's a kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So in that whole process, though, it's very unlikely. Like most people say that nowadays, and back in the day, that you probably change your career every 7 years.
Yeah.
Did you find, though, during that, because you were there for almost 40 years,
Yeah.
right? Was there a time, or was it that great that you could, almost every 7 years, did you feel, or different times, that there was a different path, but still the comfort and the success you were having there?
Yeah.
Is that what kept you there?
Well, it was kind of interesting. Along the way, I had a lot of opportunities to leave the company.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to stay with the company, but I didn't want to move. I was in the federal business, and that meant dealing with not only the local federal customers that I had, but also a broader community of the federal government. And so they wanted me to take that kind of responsibility in Washington. And I really had to come to at a point in my life where I said, all right, what are you going to do? Are you going to stay with the company and continue to do well with them, or are you going to take the move and go with them? And I decided right then I wasn't going to leave Chelmsford. I had a beautiful home in Chelmsford, and I just decided that I wasn't going to do it. By the way, there seemed to be a number of companies that were growing in the area that probably had a need for someone like me. So I wasn't concerned about it. But along about the same time, Honeywell offered me promotions in the field. So I went not only from being a local manager of salespeople to a branch manager of salespeople, and then eventually a regional manager about in the 1980s or so.
Yeah.
So I was really doing very well. I kept getting invitations to go to Washington, and I kept saying no. And that's not a good thing to do, but
Right.
I think I was aware of the kinds of problems people were having in a big city environment like that. Most of all, I noticed it from the people that I dealt with that had problems with their kids. And I had wonderful kids,
Right.
and they were very closely associated with everyone that we have in town. And they weren't interested in leaving.
Yeah.
So we just decided we were gonna stay with them.
So speaking of those kids and thinking about that too, you said your siblings helped you get through Chelmsford High and those kind of things. And so what was the path that you were always talking to your kids about? Like what were, because again, we talk about it, there's something special about Chelmsford.
Yeah.
And there's something special about the school system that really inspires our kids to have success. But you went through it, and so if there was ever any doubt, or what were your expectations for them going through this?
Well, I wanted them to go to college, clearly, and I was of good health, so I wasn't concerned about that. And so my suggestions to them were get in a course, stay in it, and make sure you find your way to college. Now, it turns out that my older daughter went to Keith, in her high school years. And that's simply because she wanted a much smaller community. And she went to that, and she had just a great stay at Keith, and she went on to college as well and became a teacher. And she's been a teacher now for
Forever.
30 years or so, you know. So I think she must have graduated around the time you did.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, but my daughter Amy was tied to the community, just like I was.
Yep.
And my son Billy as well.
And because of sports, though, too.
Because of sports, yes. Sports was a big deal for all of them. Yeah. And until they got to college, you know, and then other things took over their lives. Yeah.
Now, through Honeywell and all that, I mean, did you get to do much traveling or those kind of things? I mean, now you wouldn't even have to. You could work in Washington and not have to be
that's
there
right.
now.
It's quite amazing, yeah. But yeah, the answer to that is yes. I mean, both when I was a regional manager in the Boston area, I was responsible for basically from Chicago all the way down through Texas, and except a portion of the South. So I traveled through the northeast part of the country on a regular basis. Later on, I got promoted to the western region of the country. That's when the company then had two regions, an eastern and western region. And that was a struggle for me. I had a beautiful home on Sylvan Ave, next to the Westland School. My kids had gone to the Westland School, and I got to hop over the fence at lunchtime to come for a swim in the afternoon. We had a beautiful situation there. And but they were all moved on to college and so forth, and I just felt that I had to say okay, and by then I had so much time in the company I didn't want to lose my retirement or anything like that, so I said yes to that, and I went ahead and accepted the job in Colorado, and the company was so gracious to me. I had all the time in the world I wanted to move. Of course, the bad news one that I ended up getting on a plane on Monday night and flying to somewhere out west for the rest of the week, and I did that for a couple of years. But we bought a house in Littleton, Colorado, and we had a beautiful time there. As a matter of fact, one of the great things about moving to Colorado was that they had just gotten a hockey team in 1984 when I moved there. And I said, by golly, I think I'll see if I can get tickets. And the tickets were probably maybe $100 a year for season passes. And I said, I'll take some of those. And we had the best time of our life. And in fact, they won the Stanley Cup, and I was at those games.
With Ray Bork.
It was terrific, right? Isn't
Right?
that great? Yeah, yeah.
But how was that when, like, the shock of picking up and heading out there? Like was it a shock at first and the adjustment? I mean, you stayed out there, but then obviously you decided, though, that it was time to
let me tell
come
you,
back.
it turns out in those years I was very active in walking. I used to get up and walk at 5 o'clock in the morning and walk till 7 o'clock all over town. As a result, the police cruiser would go by and honk the horn. I knew who they were, they knew who I was. The same thing is true with the firemen, the post office, all the people in town. I knew everyone. When I went to Colorado, I still walked, but nobody knew who I was. And
no
I
honking.
knew that was coming. And that really tugged on me for a long while. When I lived in Colorado, the first year it was bearable. The second year, I said, yeah, this isn't a bad place. The third year I lived there, I said, I really like it here. And the fourth year, I thought it was great, but the company said, Bob, we'd like to come back to Massachusetts. And I said, yes, I'd be happy to do that. And so we did that. It was tough to go away, but it turned out to be a wonderful 4 years of our life to spend in Colorado.
Well, change is good.
Yes.
You know, you made kind of a change. It wasn't 7 years, so it was only 4, and the big thing.
Yeah.
What would be some of the things, though, that staying with the company, because people don't do it very often, and like, what was the sense of pride? And are there projects or different things that you can really say, like, yeah, you know what,
Yeah.
I got this done?
Yeah. Well, I don't know what to say in that regard, because the projects that I was involved with were all federal government.
So you can't
And
give
we were-
trade secrets.
Pardon me?
You can't give away secrets.
Yeah, well,
right.
that's certainly a problem in some of the stuff, but by and large, I mean, I was at a lot of military bases during that time of our history. If you think back in the 70s and 80s, where everything we were doing was classified, and a lot of the work was classified. And that was very encouraging to me. I hadn't been in the service, and I was delighted to be able to play a role in that regard.
When you're in a situation like that, though, and you had a bad day and you can't talk about it,
Yeah.
how hard is that?
Well, you get used to that after a while.
After a while, yeah.
Yeah, there are still people that are in the group that you can associate with that can talk about it as well. So you can deal with that kind of thing. Yeah.
But not very easily.
No.
And
no.
so is that one of the reasons why you walked a lot?
That's a good idea. It might be
It
part
might
of the
have been,
reason.
right, to just clear your head and start the day and know what was going on. And
Yeah.
kind of talk to yourself out there
Yeah,
walking.
yeah.
I'm sure that there was my father, or I know those police officers, though, that,
Yeah.
they were just waivers and stuff like that. Coming back, though, when it was all said and done and you're kind of finishing your career, did you know, like, well, this is the great move when they asked you? Like you said you started to like Colorado, but did you eventually say, you know what, though, that is where we're going to end?
Yeah, it was, I was glad to have the opportunity to come back home. We had a beautiful home on Sylvan Ave. That was gone. And someone else, was living in all the places that I want to live around town. But we made the choice to come back. Perhaps the thing that was most consequential about coming back was when we packed up to leave. My son, who had just graduated just the summer before from Colorado State University, said, "Bye-bye, Mom and Dad." He said, "I'm staying here."
Yeah.
And that worked out well. We felt badly about that. My wife cried all the way to driving across country because of that. But he made out very well, and he's done phenomenally well in Colorado as well.
But you still go out to visit, and
We still go out to visit. We spent.
and the girls are here.
Yeah, and they come to visit us.
Yeah.
We have 7 grandchildren now, so
Yeah.
that's in Colorado and in Framingham and that area.
So it worked out in that respect.
Yeah.
And so now you just still like to visit.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you decide that, or Honeywell or whatever, when you're planning on those kind of things, but you're in a comfort zone, was that easier? Like comfort zone meaning that you're where you wanted to be.
Yeah. Well,
Because it's got to be, you were
I have
so
to tell you-
vested, it must have been hard.
well, in the computer business,
Yeah.
you really had to watch out every day and read the newspaper, the Wall Street Journal, or whatever, to find out what was going on. Because you had to be aware that there was always some other company that was going to come in and challenge you, not only me as an individual, but the company in so many areas. So there are a lot of things that you had to keep aware of. I mean, there was an enormous amount of schooling that the company would put us through to make sure we were on top of all of that. And that was always great to have that stuff. But the fact is that I finally got to the point where I was 56 years old, and because of the old-fashioned rules that they had in companies, I could retire at age 55. And so I already had been moved back here, and I thought this would be a good opportunity to retire. I retired, but I pretty much stayed in the business because shortly after I retired, I took a job with Sun Microsystems, and I stayed there for another 10 years. And then I retired at 66, and my wife and I began to live the life we wanted to live.
So when you look right now in the world of computers, could you ever imagine where it's at?
Oh my goodness.
And you said you were keeping up with the times, but was there was there an aha moment at any time
Yeah.
that you were just like,
And it was
Wow.
very early in my time in the company. My federal group had a contract with MIT, and we were helping them develop a system. And I spent a good deal of time at MIT. And one day while I was there, they gave me a tour of the labs that they had in Cambridge. And as part of that, they showed me the MIT version of the most advanced thing that they had. And what they did was to take a computer in the lab and have the computer operate in a laboratory like this. And in the course of doing that, they could throw things on the floor and they would cause the computer to avoid them and go in a different way. Well, that was in 1971 or 72, and that was their work that they were doing on artificial intelligence, right?
Yeah.
In 1972. Well, we thought that was quite amazing that they were able to get this device to sense those things and be able to move and so forth. But later on came, what was the game? The Pac-Man game and all of those kinds of things that came out of that, and so many of those kinds of things in artificial intelligence. And now we see artificial intelligence, and it's, in a place where we can't believe it.
it's hard to talk about and hard to fathom. I think we could talk about it because you could just tell that your passion, though, for it was always there. Like every day, it just sounds like you got up and you just knew something great was going to be happening.
Yeah. And absolutely. And I did it for however many years, 40, 45, 47 years, something like that.
Wow.
So it was a terrific amount of time. But during that time, I'm delighted to come back to Chelmsford and live here. I've been involved in all the things that we were doing all over town. And this is, we live up on the lake now in Chelmsford. And it's great for us.
Yeah. Well, I so appreciate it. I think I should have the whole family back. Everybody went to Chelmsford High. So I appreciate you coming in and sharing your story and just the passion that you had from kind of a strange way of getting into the company.
Yeah.
But to spend all that time and have such great success. So
Yeah.
thank you very much for being with me here on Where Are They Now? And I'll probably have you back.
Well, you're terrific. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All righty.